The Chinese are protesting against the government's lockdown policy, the thousands, and the authorities are not making it easy for them. Deaths, injured protesters, and chaos in 17 different cities, mainly in Beijing, Shanghai and Nanjing, with some even calling on Xi Jinping to step down.
Anti-government slogans that were once whispered, now shouted in the streets of Shanghai. Protesters in China's largest city crying down with the Chinese Communist Party and down with Xi Jinping. Those chants are a red line in a nation where political protest is not tolerated. We need to be brave, this man says. Am I a criminal for holding a flower?
Protesters are demanding their president resign in light of its recent failures and conventional COVID-0 restriction policies. Stay until the end, because in today's video, we will break out the hidden truth about this mass protest and the fury behind the resignation demands. But before moving on, don't forget to subscribe to Financial Countdown and ring the bell to be notified when new content comes out. According to reports from the main international television channels, the Chinese demonstrations and protests took place in 17 cities starting last Saturday, and since then,
protests this week in cities across the country. And in the capital, students at this elite Beijing university turning blank pieces of paper into a symbol of resistance, calling for democratic rule of law and freedom of speech. Experts say some of their demands have echoes of the 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square.
It is extremely unusual for people to openly call for the downfall of the party. It has not happened basically since 1989.
Then,
2 weeks after
the momentum of the demonstrations has increased and spread from one city to another, in what appears to be the first mass protest in China in recent decades. The nation's fate depends on the next few weeks and the following decision. China has recorded a high number of new COVID cases in the past few months. The increasing number was a major concern for the nation's leader, so the country imposed a mandatory lockdown on some cities. And that's when it all started. The capital of the far western region of Xinjiang has been under strict lockdown for the past 100 days.
2 weeks after his first face-to-face meeting with President Biden, Xi Jinping now facing a crisis at home. The question, how will he respond? Xi had tried easing his zero COVID rules to help the economy, but with cases now at a record high, local authorities have tightened restrictions once again. Protesters blaming those restrictions for stopping fire crews reaching this blaze. People who have lived through what feels like a never-ending lockdown, now taking their anger to the streets.
Reports say that the residents was able to do simple human activities like walking or jogging. The residents went rogue and protested against the local authorities, an incident that left behind 10 dead people. On top of that, the Chinese government announces that it will begin a new zero COVID-19 restriction policy. That was when the protest began. What makes these protests more aggressive and serious is the trending video that shows the Urumqi residents marching to the government building and protesting against violating their human rights during the lockdowns.
There have been protests in dozens of cities, in major urban centers from Shanghai to Sichuan, in college campuses, in business districts. You've seen people coming out onto the streets and protesting against the zero COVID policy that has kept them locked in their homes for many months, but also against the rule of Xi Jinping and a whole series of different social and political grievances.
Other disturbing details are shown in the shared videos, indicating a clear violation of its residents. The incident and the shared videos were enough to send thousands of protesters to the streets in various cities and regions, We are talking about the largest mass protest in the country's history, at least in the past 4 decades. Reports show that the police and the security authorities have responded directly to the country's president and proceeded over the process of searching for the involved protesters and pursuing them legally. It's clear that the country's president, Xi Jinping, is losing the support of his followers, and in a critical moment, the Chinese president's first action is to discourage protesters from gathering, which he can achieve to some degree. A large number of police members in the field was a key factor in maintaining and controlling the protesters, at least for now. The fury and the rag have not yet decreased, but rumors say that the number of protests will reach a record in the next week. For now, the protesters demand to lift the COVID restriction policies and demand freedom and democracy. And of course, none of that could happen unless Xi Jinping resigns from its leadership.
They've become a symbol of the biggest threat yet to China's leadership. Blank pieces of paper held aloft by protesters, like here in Beijing, a silent rejection of censorship. This rally, just one of dozens that have spread across China. Just hours earlier, huge crowds turned out in Shanghai in a rare defiance of Chinese authorities. Years of pandemic lockdowns have pushed people here to their limit.
Investors across the globe turn their eyes towards China and the rising protests there. The Chinese are in a rage and fury against their government's policies and the country's president in particular. This rage will affect the country and the world as well. China is the world's second largest economy, and any distribution or unwanted conflicts will expand the stock market losses, especially when the level of market uncertainty is high. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street main index dipped as investors worried about the long-term impact of the protest on the stock market and the Nasdaq. In terms of what will happen in the next few days, the uncertainty level is high, and although the government has begun to ease the lockdowns, yet it's more likely to see an aggressive protest and a more aggressive response from the authorities. Your opinion is very important to us. You can leave it in the comment box below this video. Thanks for watching.